Welcome, guest and fellow Toastmasters. We all know that I love the camaraderie in this room, and little did I know that our camaraderie would have all three of our speeches tying together. Because if I were to pick up this football and throw it right to Stephen, we would think we were playing ball. But 2 weeks ago, I brought you a speech with never a dull moment, and as Linda shared, there never is a dull moment. But today, it's about let's be real. So in Let's Be Real, my message is for everybody in the room who's of the 60s, 70s, and 80s generation. So who are you? Better yet, who's not of that generation? Okay, I promise you that you will all be able to tie in and connect with the story. Now, I just shared where my story went with Stephen. And this was a generation where 9 a.m. we would leave our house and we wouldn't come home until 9 p.m. And our parents, they didn't have a phone, so they certainly didn't call the police, nor did they worry about us because they knew we would show up. But little did I know that my son, which is what ties right into Beata, would come to me and say to me, "Hey, Mom, in the 80s, you guys had you had it the best. You guys were rocking in the 80s. That was the best generation." And this prompted me to think, what do you mean? Well, think about it. You didn't have to call home, Mom. There was no text messaging, no Life 360, no nothing. And I thought to myself for a second, you're right. Because when I called home, guess what? The phone was in the kitchen with that cord that, was as long as you and you could wrap it around your body. God knows I spent plenty of time sitting on the floor wrapping it around my body and talking while racking up my mother's phone bill because back then you paid by the minute. Hard to believe for the younger generation, but yes, $400 and $500 phone bills were real. And then he said to me, I said, well, what else? What do you mean by the 80s? What was the best generation? He said, well, aside from text messaging and everything, it was like pictures. Think about it. Now we have pictures and they're on our phone and it's real time. In your day, you actually drove down, dropped off the film, and waited for the pictures to come to you. I said, well, I would think it's more exciting for you. He was like, no. He was like, you didn't know what your pictures look like. I know what mine look like. And I thought to myself, that's funny, because half of our pictures look like Bigfoot. And we paid for them, which was even crazier, right? But we still put them in the photo album, and they were great. So then I realized, wow, we were of the generation where we burned CDs, and we actually had to go to Blockbuster. Remember that? We had to walk into the Blockbuster store, spend 45 minutes to actually pick out a bad movie that was horrible. But we paid for that too. It was crazy. Now you just watch it on Netflix for free, well, kind of for free. And then the reality comes to me that says, oh, driving home, we didn't text anybody. We didn't have any emojis that we were sending to anybody. We actually had to walk up to the door and pull in their driveway and knock on the door and have the human face-to-face interaction if we wanted them to come join us and watch the movie with us. Wow, nowadays you just text. So I said, all right, Nick, what else? What else? Why do you think my generation? Now listen, in my heart, I really think us 80s kids had it the best. Because I know I've done way more than my son will ever do. And while these kids are pretty privileged, I often think to myself, wow, we were the generation that really, life was much simpler and yet more meaningful in a lot of ways. So, okay, I say, what else? He says, well, when you went to the mall, it was actually like an event, Mom. He said all the stores were full, and you guys went on a date, face to face. You weren't texting, you weren't talking to each other on a date. You were going to the mall, walking around, and he said, even if you didn't have any money, you walked around and acted like you did, but you got to smell the pretzels, the Annie's pretzels. Remember those? Yeah. And I was shocked that my son was saying this to me, because so many times he's like, I want to be living in the 80s. And you know what it comes down to? He said to me, Mom, you guys were free. You guys were free to do whatever you wanted. So true. Free. I was like, wow, Nick, that's pretty intuitive, and you're right. So as time goes on, I start thinking more and more about this. And I say to him, all right, what else? He says, oh, let me tell you more. He said, you actually cared what you wore. You put on denim jeans and vibrant colors. He said, my generation, sweatshirts, t-shirts, and we're lazy. I'm like, oh, I'm glad you can realize that that is you sometimes. And then he says to me, on top of all that, think about the music you had. And I was like, wow, what do you mean? He's like, well, you had Michael Jackson, you had Metallica, you had Bon Jovi, Whitney Houston. He's like, it was real music. And I was like, Nick, that's pretty cool, because you're right. Nothing was synthesized, especially me, the Phil Collins lover, because now all the music is synthesized, right? So, while technology has made us so much more advanced, it has really simplified our life in a lot of ways, but it has not made our lives more meaningful always. Because the reality is that the meaning comes down to that one-on-one interaction. So what I want you to take away today is a few small things. I want you to think about. Go back in time when in your heart that song resonated and it made you feel something. Or when you had a flower that you just smelled, right? And you smelled it. Or you had technology that came to place. But think about these things that brought meaning to you, true meaning. And the reality is that we're the generation that bridges that gap. So if you lived in those generations, we're really, really blessed, because we got to experience a lot of the things that going forward, the generations don't get to experience with that freedom. But lastly, when I say that meaning, also think back to the simple times when it was just the sound of the screen door, your grandparents' screen door closing. How many screen doors do we really have now? We don't. So I leave you today with be kind, be loving, and always remember to have meaning in your life. Back to you, Madam Toastmaster.